Now while you're watching this video, please remember to like, share this video, subscribe to my channel and click the bell icon for notifications of future videos. Thank you.
Well, hello there. Welcome back to my channel, guys. I have for you yet again another exciting video. And as you can see, the title suggests, can women exercise authority over men? 1 Timothy 2 verses 11 to 15 explain. At the timing of this video, when I'm recording it, it would be July 21, 2021 on Wednesday. Wednesdays I normally do what I call text explanation. At least for now, that's the focus on Wednesdays. But I'm telling you this because I'm not certain it will be posted on the day I would intend it to. Well, it won't be, right? And so I am telling you this. Now, I did a video. It was last week Friday, talking about if women can be pastors or bishop, right? So this video I'm doing now, text explanation, I know that persons would raise these passages of scripture as an argument to refute what I said in that video, which if you watched it, you would see me saying that I affirm women actually being pastors, right? What I don't affirm, right, is women being bishop, because based on what I study, what I see or understand from scripture, the role of a bishop, right, which would be head pastor or overseer, right, leader that presides over all churches or districts of churches, one who has the highest authority, that should be the man, right, the bishop. However, a woman can serve as pastor but not senior pastor, right, not in a capacity of a bishop, right? No, persons would raise 1 Timothy 2 verse 11 to 15 as a counter argument, right? And so in this video we want to talk about 1 Timothy 2 verse 11 to 15. Now, in order to go into these verses, let's get some context first. The epistle to Timothy that was written by Paul. If you read 1 Timothy chapter 1, right, you realize that Paul talks about giving heed to fables and endless genealogies, right? This was the basis of the first chapter, talking about persons desiring to be teachers of the law and so forth, and he ended by talking about two persons who blaspheme, that is Hymenaeus and Alexander. In chapter 3, his emphasis was about the qualification of a bishop and deacon, those who desire such. In chapter 4, he was talking about what's going to happen in the last days, right? In chapter 5, he was talking about elder, rebuke not an elder, but entreat him as a father, right? And things like these. In chapter 6, he made emphasis about servants and so forth, and just about a variety of things. This first epistle to Timothy is addressing numerous things, right? I'm giving you context, so that you can understand 1 Timothy. So it's not a case where Paul is just talking about one central thing where this epistle is concerned. He's talking about numerous things. Now, if you read in chapter 2, I left chapter 2 for last. Chapter 2 began by saying, I exhort therefore that first of all supplication, prayers, intercessions, and giving of thanks be made for all men, for kings and for all that are in authority, that we may lead a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and honesty. Right? He spent some time talking about how women should dress, right? And then in the last verses, he made mention of something that we are going to talk about now. Now, is the entire epistle being addressed to the church? The answer to that is no. It was written to Timothy. If you notice, with other epistles, the epistle to the Romans, it's addressed to the church of Rome. The epistle 1st and 2nd Corinthians, it is addressed to the church at Corinth. Galatians, it is addressed to the church at Galatia. Ephesians, it is addressed to the church of Ephesus. Philippians, it is addressed to the church at Philippi. Colossians, it is addressed to the church at Colossae. 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, it is addressed to the church at Thessalonica. Titus is addressed to a specific person named Titus. Philemon is addressed to Philemon, right? And you know the works. Let's not talk about Hebrews now, right? But there's a reason I pointed out this, because in order to understand the verses of 1 Timothy 2, verse 11 to 15, verse 11 to 15, it is important to understand that this epistle is not addressed to the church or to any church. It is addressed specifically to a fellow co-laborer with Paul, and that is Timothy. And in addressing this letter to Timothy, he is giving Timothy several instructions. This is important to note, because you can't say that Paul is saying that women shouldn't preach in the church, they shouldn't be a pastor in the church, and they shouldn't exercise authority in the church, when the epistle is not even addressed to the church. You see why I stress the point who this was written to is important. It is not written to the church. It's not dealing with church governance per se, mostly. That's not the whole emphasis of this epistle. He's giving several different instructions to Timothy. So it's not confined to what happens in the church and so forth. No. As a matter of fact, the very first time church is even mentioned in this epistle, right? That is First Timothy. It is actually in chapter 3. That's the first time church is even mentioned. When he's talking about bishop, and in verse 5 he says, "For if a man know not how to rule his own house, how shall he take care of the church of God?" That is the first time Paul actually mentioned the word church in this first epistle to Timothy. So therefore in chapter 2, it's not whatever he said here, it is not directed at, it is not saying, it's not talking about how one should operate in the church. No. If that's the case, then it would mean that women should only dress appropriate when they are going to church. Voila! And I'm sure that most of you would not say that it is only when women are going to church, they shouldn't wear certain things showing their boobs, or they shouldn't wear skirt showing their butt or anything showing their butt cock. Certainly, Christian women is not expected to only dress modest when they are going to church. This is a subject that is talked about in this epistle, so that alone is a giveaway that verse 11 to 15 is not talking about it is not saying that women shouldn't exercise authority in the church. The context is not talking anything about what should happen or shouldn't happen in the church. I spent a lot of time going through all of that, showing you the context. Now, before I even get to the verse, there's something else important I want to point out to you where these verses is concerned. In verse 8 is even a giveaway. I'm going to begin from verse 8. Verse 8, "I will therefore that men pray everywhere, lifting up holy hands without wrath and doubting." Right? Without wrath and doubting. Or let me read from the ESV. "I desire that in every place men should pray, lifting holy hands without anger or quarrel." Notice Paul said everywhere, So this alone shows is not talking about in the church. Men should pray everywhere, right? And then after that, he goes on to say, "Likewise also that women should adorn themselves in respectable apparel, with modesty and self-control, not with braided hair and gold or pearls or costly array, but with what is proper for women who profess godliness with good works." I'm not going to explain those verses, right? Because I have videos where I talk about how women should dress, modesty and so forth. Check it out in the playlist in the playlist section titled Christian Adornment, right? So I'm going to skip those. I just wanted to show you the context that from verse 8, we see that it's not talking about church, right, guys? Because it's not only in the church women should dress appropriate, right? So with that being said, let us go to verse 11 now. Let a woman learn quietly with all submissiveness, right? Now, verse 10, verse 12. I do not permit a woman to teach or to exercise authority over a man. Rather, she is to remain quiet. Right? Now, Paul gives his reason for this in verse 13. For Adam was formed first, then Eve. And Adam was not deceived, but the woman was deceived and became a transgressor. Right? Yet she will be saved through childbearing, if they continue in faith and love and holiness with self-control. So Paul gives you his reason why he doesn't permit a woman to teach or to exercise authority over a man. Now, the Greek word used for woman there, verse 12 and even verse 11, it can be translated as wife, right? It can be translated as wife. Verse 11 and verse 12, woman mentioned there, can be translated as wife. In verse 12, man mentioned there can also be translated as husband. Now, in all fairness, I checked NIV translation, I checked New King James translation, right? And I also look at Darby, Word English, and I forgot the name of that translation. American King James Version, American Standard Version, Webster, Darby, and I've looked at several translations, and it all translated the same way, to my disappointment actually. The only translation I see that translated differently is the Young Literal's translation, right? And this is how the Young Literal's translations put it, which I am in favor of. Verse 11 to 15. Let a woman in quietness learn in all subjection. And a woman I do not suffer to teach, nor to rule a husband, right? But to be in quietness. For Adam was first formed, then Eve. And Adam was not deceived, but the woman, having been deceived into transgression, came. And she shall be saved through the childbearing, if they remain in faith and love and sanctification with sobriety. I'm in favor of the Young Literal translation. Why? Because based on the context, right, there is no way we could expect that women shouldn't exercise authority over men. None at all. Because we already established that it's not talking about in the church. At no time in chapter 2 church is even mentioned, right? And I gave him a reason why, because men are to pray everywhere according to verse 8, not just in the church. And women should dress modestly, not just in the church. So the verses after, it's not in the church it's talking. So therefore, the fact that it's not talking in the church, a big question mark should be raised right away. Is Paul saying then, if he's not talking in the church, that all women should be subject to all men? If you take it at face value, you know, this is what you'd actually be saying, that all women should be submissive to all men. So if this is the case, then say that my sister should be submissive to me, should my mother be submissive to me, should my boss, who is a female, be submissive to me? As a matter of fact, I wouldn't even dare attempt to tell my boss to be submissive to me, or to expect her to be submissive to me. I think I would be out of a job by the same day. Right, guys? I'd be out of a job the same day. Now, should I expect another man's wife to be submissive to me? Since one would take this text, you know, and say that women shouldn't be pastor because women shouldn't have authority over men, right? Are you saying that women shouldn't have authority over no man, or women should be submissive to all men? Is that what you're saying by using these verses? Women shouldn't have authority over men, but they should be submissive to them? That wouldn't make any sense now, right? Hence why common sense should tell you that what Paul is talking about is husband to wife. So he doesn't permit a wife then, so to speak, to teach her to exercise authority over her own husband. And the very fact that he brought up Adam and Eve, saying Adam was formed first, then Eve, right, as a reason for this, it goes to show you that it's husband and wife, because Adam is Eve husband. So he gives this reason, the order that women should be submissive to their own husband, just as Eve is submissive to Adam. Certainly, if you take this text and say women should be submissive to men, so therefore women shouldn't be pastors in church, or they shouldn't preach or teach in church. Yes, if you're going to use those verses and say that, will you then say that Eve should have been submissive to all men, right? And that she shouldn't exercise authority over any man at all, but should be submissive to all men? Is that what you're gonna say? Because if that is true, that would mean that Eve should have rightly submitted to Cain. Or if not Cain, she should have been submissive to Abel, her son that died by her other son Cain. Or she should have been submissive to Seth. Or she should have been submissive to all of her sons then. Right? And her grandsons and so on. See where I'm coming from? Why that wouldn't make any sense? Clearly, the verses is actually saying that women should be submissive to their husband. They shouldn't teach or exercise authority over them. Now, this is not to say that a woman can't teach her husband, Right? She can teach him, but she shouldn't teach in a domineering type of way. You understand? She shouldn't teach in an authoritative type of way to her husband. No, because that is not proper, nor is it right in the sight of God. Right? So this is what Paul is actually conveying. Now, I end this video. I do hope that you enjoyed it and are edified from it. Right? If you do, you know what to do. Like, comment, subscribe, and share this video. Bye-bye now.